Good evening and welcome to the Selectmen's meeting for Thursday, January 29th, 2015. The order tonight will be approval of minutes, questions from the public regarding items not on the agenda. We will do a series of 3 warrant articles. There will be a discussion and potential vote on the whistleblower policy. Then we will have a very good session, a very happy session, joint session with the Advisory Committee and the Community Preservation Committee with Bob Curley giving the presentation. We'll do appointments, Selectmen Town Administrator reports, and then we will adjourn to an executive session, again a joint session with the Advisory Committee for an update on the Aquarian litigation, and we will not be returning to open session. So, on approval of minutes, you're still holding on the 18th?
If you want.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the public regarding items not on the agenda? Okay. And let's go into the warrant articles. Betty, are you taking us through it or Ted taking us through it?
I can take you through these.
Okay.
But I would like to start out by thanking our Assistant Town Administrator, Betty Foley. We have a requirement that we get all these warrant articles done and ready for publication for February 1. They're due in the 20th, as you know, and we've had a couple of issues the last few days, but yet here you have this beautiful book and everything well done, tabbed up and ready to go, and so I wanted to give Betty credit for a great job as usual.
I must say that she was with Betty. That's put this all together. She did a wonderful job.
Well, I know that you organized that. The 3 warrant articles you have are Articles B, C, and G. As you know, we label them alphabetically until we label them numerically for the actual warrant, which is at the discretion of the board. And item B is to assume liability for DCR and rivers and harbors. And the purpose of this article is, again, this is one of usually the first 12 articles, mostly housekeeping of nature. Allows us to accept grants from DCR for work they might do or actual work they would do, and they require us to assume liability. And so we annually ask town meeting to allow the Board of Selectmen to grant them that liability. Without this article, they won't do any work on our properties.
That's
understandably. Correct. So I would certainly recommend favorable action on this to the board.
Comments or questions from either of you? No. Do we go ahead and vote these then?
As your pleasure, either individually or collectively as a group.
The group of 3? Why don't we do that?
Okay. The second one is Article C, reports of various towns and committees, and again, very standard housekeeping. It's just to accept the reports of all committees at town meetings. So,
are any of the committees rolling off this year? Okay, you want to go on? Any questions from either of you? Sorry, these are like secondhand to me, so.
Yeah, there's no, again, here, there very rarely is any issue with an article of this nature. Article G is transfer from the stabilization fund, and this is pursuant to, we're sort of getting to the tail end of this. Back in the mid-90s, the town built this facility, and in the article that called for this facility to be built, it called for the sale of several buildings: the former school administration building downtown, the municipal light building, which is also downtown, former police station, and each of those buildings were the disposition of those assets were into the stabilization fund, and then we take a portion of them out equally over the last 20 years. We are, I believe, closing that out this year or next year. It should be. We will have a little longer than 20 years because by virtue of putting the money into the stabilization fund, we were able to earn some interest on it, which we were able to continue on a little further. But we're town meetings vote back in the mid-90s for this building and use those proceeds from those buildings to offset the tax rate.
Maybe could you read the recommended motion on this one?
Sure. Recommend that the town appropriate the sum of $65,413 from the stabilization fund for the purpose of reducing the fiscal 2016 tax rate. And this has been built into all of our forecasts and budgets, for many years now.
Questions?
Yeah.
Good. So shall we take a motion on all three of these?
I'll move that we recommend favorable action on proposed articles B, C, and G.
Second.
Any further discussion? Any comments from the audience? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The whistleblower policy, and George, that was perfect timing, you walking in the room. Do you and Sue want to come up and join us? The whistleblower policy is a result of the audit committee, and Sue very capably is the person that handles the audit committee, and George Alexakos, who's joining us. Thank you very much. And George, do you want to give us a little bit of background on it?
Sure. In terms of...
How we got here? Because this is a great draft.
Thank you. I take no credit for it. The audit committee, as you know, is somewhat new, but to the town. And we've been talking for a bit about the concept of a whistleblower policy and the benefit it would have to us. We have spoken with our external accounts about seeing what best practices were, what were our peers doing. We did our research online, if you will, and looked at other things. Ted was kind enough to bring in and reaffirm it and help take the initiative to forward, if you will, and help draft this policy. So I can't give you the more specific dates because I didn't bring those with me. But again, it's something the audit committee has been talking about for a while, and with the help of Ted and others, we are recommending that we move forward with it for the benefit of the town to, if you will, meet best practices for fiduciary standards for ensuring that employees of the town have the capacity by which to report concerns they have on a basis by which they can avoid fear of retribution, if you will.
And we received comments and minor changes, which I think kudos to you all. From John Coughlin, he made really minor changes and gave a couple very good suggestions. So I'll open it up to the two Pauls, since I sit on the committee. So watch this kind of evolve. And for any questions that the two of you might have.
I had no comment. I read it. I'm happy with what it says, and I'm prepared to go forward.
I just have a question. In the page 2, when it talks about reporting, the quarterly reports to the selectmen, and the town administrator, is there I'm just so I understand the process, is that in a written form, or is it verbal? I mean, I know we're trying to, anonymity at some point is important, so I just wanted to...
What I would suggest, and I apologize, I didn't have a chance to give my other iteration. The only thing I would maybe think about enhancing there is that this kind of reporting needs to be done with some degree of without attribution, whether it's in writing or in person, to protect the integrity of the process. It depends on the reporting issue at hand and so forth. I've seen it done in companies and other organizations in writing and verbally. So it's really we can make it more specific, but it's really at the discretion of of whom we're reporting to, how they'd like it. But the degree of detail obviously has to be commensurate with the degree of the importance, or if someone's complaining about something and they want to maintain their confidential nature, we have to respect that along the way. But it can be either way, in written form or in verbal form.
And I was really just trying to see what was envisioned, because one of the things that jumped at me is that we want to protect the confidentiality to the extent that it's there in the anonymity. And when we say reporting, I wasn't sure what that meant.
They do it also, if I can use an example from the private sector, we report in the private sector for, let's see, Bank Secrecy Act information. To protect the directors, the board of directors, to protect the corporate shield, the bank secrecy officer, or the risk officer, or the general counsel will report on an anonymous basis about the type of issue, when it was reported, the status of whether an investigation was done, and the disposition of the investigation. And it protects the board of directors, if you will, particularly if they may know the individual involved or the parties involved. So they do it for a dual purpose. And it's done in writing, but it's also recorded otherwise.
And just, I guess what I'm saying is that once it's been reported to us, let's just say it's in writing, what restrictions are on us? I mean, in other words, is there a place that we put these things? Is there a safe place for them? Or
Well,
I don't know where we go.
Those reports, again, would I expect, depending on, figure this out with general counsel and others, in terms of the reporting, if it's, again, it's on an anonymous basis, we're giving you the high level of the issue at hand without a name of the person or to whom it's reported upon. Those would be kept as a matter of record for you all. The details behind it would be kept by the committee and or general counsel or the investigator, depending on the degree of severity or confidential nature of the reporting.
Last question. So I get that, but once we have the records, what if somebody requests those records? I don't know if it's freedom of information or just some other request to the selectmen saying we want to look at those reports. What protection do we have, if any, to keep those from public view, or should we keep them from public view?
I can give you my opinion. I've got at least a couple lawyers up here I know who I'm definitely out of my league in answering that question. I don't officially know, but that's why, again, when we report it to you all, it would be at a level that it would be disclosable to that level. I know some corporations hire an outside investigator vis-a-vis general counsel, because what that does is it provides the confidentiality by attorney-client privilege there, where the town hires an attorney to do the investigation. It provides a shield there, and they report back. I'm not suggesting that's what we're doing here, but that's one thing I've seen in the private sector. But that's a good question, and we need to make sure that the process does not impinge anybody from doing what they need to do, but protect the confidentiality of the whistleblower.
I would imagine if we did enact this, then we saw something that needed to be addressed, we could do that at any time.
We can
right?
come back, right, and
Okay.
amend it.
Okay.
George, the one overriding fact that I wanted to be sure of, and I think we're covered many different ways, including where the federal law also takes precedence in this, is that we protect the person that comes forward from any retribution with no question. And I think I found that in here, and in talking with John Coughlin, he assures me that protection is there. So I think you all did a wonderful job, and based on the small amount of red coming from Mr. Coughlin, I'd say you got very high marks on this.
For those who drafted it? Kudos to them.
Well, Sue was very active in this, which is kind of why I encouraged her to come up.
I was only at the meetings. Everybody, David Basler did a lot too.
David did, and we should give him a lot of credit for this, because it is very well written. I'll take any questions from the audience on this, if we have any. Otherwise, are we comfortable that we want to move this forward, vote on it?
I'll move that we adopt a whistleblower policy.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you to the committee.
We've got probably 3 or 4 minutes before 7:30. Should we do some town administrator selectman reports?
Sure, I can give you a couple of items. I did have something that I wanted for the meeting upstairs. Unfortunately, we're not here. I'll share it with the board members. I don't know if the cameras will be able to pick it up, but Bob Beal sent me a picture of the USS Kodiak Island Coast Guard cutter. And if you notice on the upper right-hand corner, that is the Hingham flag flying alongside.
Oh, nice.
the Stars and
His son
Stripes.
is on this ship.
And so, it was quite. I received that as I was losing one of my lungs, it felt like, in my cold last week. And so it was a nice little uplift to see that. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but I will show it at the next meeting. I'll give a PDF of it to Bob so we can get it up there nicely. And I'll just let you know that preliminary estimates from the DPW on the storm that we just had, and the costs are about $350,000 to $400,000. We will be submitting those along with other expenses to MEMA and ultimately to FEMA if they declare this a disaster and make us eligible for funding. We think we'll meet the thresholds, but of course it requires a gubernatorial direction. So just give you an update on what that cost.
Thank you. And speaking of the storm, let me take an opportunity now to thank our first responders, the police and fire, for the great job they did. Mike Mullen and his DPW crews, who were literally out all night. And however he has reconfigured the plow routes, I heard from lots of people, they were here all the time. So however you did that, Mike Mullen, keep doing it, because the plows were definitely out keeping the streets. Also want to give Randy and his people a special thank you, for they did a little job for us at Lincoln School Apartments that made all the difference in the world for the folks that live there. And a thank you to Paul Henu and the light plant for keeping the power on. I'm not aware of anybody that lost power at all. And a special thank you there if anyone calls the light plant during emergencies. You'll notice we get the women on the phone, and they're wonderful, because in storms like this, you figure you're going to get grumpy people or you're going to get voicemail. And what we get are the women that work there. So thank you all very much. It's just delightful to have a nice voice when you call. Here's some figures, and these come from Mark Duff, Emergency Management. Hingham received 24 inches of snow. It's the highest amount since the blizzard of '78, in which we received 28 inches. The high wind gust at Central Fire Station was 48 miles an hour, and a private citizen in Crow Point reported a gust at 60. So it was quite the storm. So have a little patience if they haven't gotten to your side street or they haven't gotten to the sidewalk in front of your house. They're moving the snow as fast as they can. Also, the 4th of July Parade Committee has announced the theme for this year. It's fabulous. Salute to our veterans. And we're running up against 7:30, but I've got one more thing, and this is wonderful too. Boys wrestling team is going for the league championship. So way to go, guys. Today they beat Plymouth North 44-28, which I understand is a very handy score, that they basically trounced them. I don't know enough about wrestling. So right now they're tied for the league championship. Next Wednesday they go up against Duxbury, and if they win that one, they win it all. So go, guys. Okay.
You have two, I think, fairly quick votes to take, and then you would be essentially done with your agenda after your meeting, if you
Awesome.
want to take those up real quickly.
Shall we take those?
I move to approve the issuance of a special one-day wine and malt beverages liquor license to Sarah Baker for the PIP wine tasting to be held at Red Eye Roasters on February 13th, 2015, from 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I'll move to approve the issuance of a special one-day wine and malt beverage liquor license to Kim O'Brien for the Hingham Sports Partnership Annual Comedy Night fundraiser to be held at the Loring Theater on Sunday, March 29, 2015, from 6:30 to 9.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. That brings us to 7:31. And Mary, do you want to call your meeting to order and join us?
Good evening. I'd like to call the Advisory Committee meeting of January 29th to order at 7:31 p.m.
They know you're here.
And we welcome the Advisory Committee to join us. I wish we had a bigger, so we could all be kind of together. And let me invite Bob Curley, Chairman of the CPC, to join us. And this is always a very happy time when you get to present the work of the committee.
We look forward to it all year. Bob Curley, 1 Gristmill Lane, Chairman of the Community Preservation Committee, which most of us refer to as the CPC. Shall I just go ahead? Perhaps just a little bit of background for our home viewing audience. But first of all, I'd like to thank the Board of Selectmen and especially our Selectman representative on the CPC, Irma Lauder. I'd like to thank the Advisory Committee and our many liaisons from the Advisory Committee who diligently always improve our process throughout all our hearings. And I'd like to thank all of the members of the CPC. I'll talk a little bit about what they do in a moment, but just a little background about the Community Preservation Act, which was adopted in Hingham roughly 14 years ago. And the Community Preservation Act authorizes the accumulation of a Community Preservation Act fund for use in three principal areas: historical preservation, open space, and community housing. And 2 years ago, recreation was added as a category that we could fund as well. The principal source of funds for the Hingham Community Preservation Fund are the property tax surtax and state matching funds. I looked in a ballpark way at the figures this afternoon, and I think roughly we've received about $15 million through those sources over the years, with about a third coming from state matching funds. So something better or in the vicinity of $5 million from the state to invest in our community. The Community Preservation Committee is comprised of 9 members, appointees from the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, the Historical Commission, the Housing Authority, the Recreation Commission, and the Board of Selectmen. And then we have 3 at-large appointments, 2 by the moderator and 1 by the Board of Selectmen. I'd like to acknowledge Carol Costello and Roger Fernandez. Carol is our administrative assistant who provides daily help, almost, it seems. I'd like to count the emails. And Roger Fernandez has done a phenomenal job of looking at all the numbers, especially where any kind of construction issue has been involved. He has invariably brought CPA projects in under budget and, for the most part, on time. The process that we follow annually changed a little bit this year in that we asked for early preliminary applications to try to streamline our process and to get more complete applications before us earlier. The preliminary application process is going to be mandatory next year, and people at late August or early September are going to have to see Carol and Roger or myself or another member of the CPC to review what they need to get on file and to at least provide us with a general outline of what's being proposed. Our process typically involves the assignment of a project manager to each project. We go and see all of the locations where projects have a physical location. We go upstairs and downstairs and look in the corners and try to get the best idea of what the project involves. We did that this year. We had multiple public hearings and presentations by the project proponents and comment by the public, input from advisory, and debate among the commission, leading to where we are tonight with the presentation of our recommendations, our proposed recommendations to the town meeting for the funding of community preservation projects for this year. And I think all of you, I guess I'm out of range of the remote. I'll ask Carol if doesn't seem to be working. All of you have a copy of basically the sheet that we used to put together our recommendations. We, of course, have to come in under budget. And Next year, we will hopefully arrange our warrant articles in the order of our spreadsheet. We have, for those who want to reference it, the sub-number of Article XX in the right-hand column. They're all pretty perfunctory at this point in time, so I think the explanation of the projects will proceed in the order on this spreadsheet. I understand that the procedure we'll follow tonight will be to address projects one by one and proceed through them with questions as to each project until we get to the end. Could go to the next slide, Carol. Thank you. Also in your packets, our total budget available for us to make recommendations against this year was the $1,098,000. After our recommendations this year, we have an uncommitted community housing reserve of $38,693, and we have an uncommitted open space reserve of $84,143, and uncommitted general funds of $395. This year we established a rainy day fund, largely from amounts that weren't needed to be expended on approved CPC projects of $46,169. So those are additional available funds that we intend to hopefully augment as the years go by, so that we will have hopefully a substantial fund for some extraordinary purpose should one arise in the future, as they seem to do. With respect to the Heritage Museum project, which was approved at town meeting in terms of a bond issuance, we have also set aside funds of $176,000. We're not anticipating, we are anticipating that construction is going to begin on that project this spring. April, I understand, is the target date, and that there will be a bond issuance, and we have set aside money to make more than enough of the first bond payment, which won't be due until probably April of 2016. And so with that background, I'll proceed to this year's recommendations. The first one relates to the Tree and Park Barn window restorations. The Tree and Park Barn is a town-owned historic building. It used to be one of our firehouses. You can see it has quite significant architectural detail as well. The building is drafty. The windows are old and in dire need of maintenance and replacement and restoration. The current tenant, Mr. Orr, is a tremendously skilled woodworker, a very, very talented person, and he has volunteered to donate work to the window restoration with an estimated value of $12,000 to $15,000 to replace the windows in a historically appropriate way. The CPC approved this project unanimously, and it is a significant town building that the CPC will probably be supporting, hopefully this year and in the future as well.
So we thought we would take each project individually and then ask everyone if they had questions on this one project versus go through all of them and then see how good your memory was. So questions from either of you, and then I'll turn it over to Mary.
No, I'm very familiar with the Tree and Park Barn. I remember when Franny Ford was there, and I've seen it go through a lot of changes, but I'm happy Dick Orr is in there. He is a craftsman of the first order, there's no question there. And if he's putting some sweat equity into making this work, that's an added plus.
I'll just say that there's been a lot of interest in this location in terms of upkeep and improvement, so I'm just glad to see that every little bit helps, and the money will go a long way, I'm sure.
And Mary?
Any questions from the advisory committee? Jim, and I think you're going to need to come to the microphone up front and introduce yourself, please.
While he's coming up, it also was a school at one time and a dance hall.
A dance hall.
It was, seriously, it was.
Jim Sharkansky, Advisory Committee, 32 Hancock Road. Simple question. I'm just wondering if the selectmen own the building, so it's landlord and tenant relationship. Is the selectmen putting any money of the revenues they earn from the rent towards the renovation of the building? I would think, as any landlord, repairs down on property are derived from the revenues earned from the rent. So I'm wondering if the town or the selectmen themselves are putting money into this as opposed to just strictly the equity from the tenant and the CPC funds.
This was actually a question asked during the CPC process, and Betty was able to pull together all of the repairs that have been done along the way, not the least of which I think while we were in the process, there was a significant issue.
Plumbing bill.
Plumbing, yeah, we'll do this politely, a plumbing bill. So yes, the money has been going back into it as repairs have been needed.
Okay, thank you.
Can I address that a little bit
Yes,
further? Because
please.
this is something that we did look at the
Extensively.
committee meetings. It was asked both with respect to this building and with respect to other town buildings. The town has some capital challenged buildings. It is not like this is a new building starting at square one. And as I understand it, the rents go back into town general funds, so that it is not as if the funds from this revenue source are budgeted into this asset, but they go into a general fund that then goes through the overall town funding process.
Correct, and that's required by state law. We cannot appropriate the rent money directly. We're required to turn it back to the general fund, and then we ask the general fund through our regular budget process for any repairs that we need for the facility. Also, when we signed the original lease with the tenant and the proposals that we asked for what people would be willing to pay in terms of rent and repairs. And if I'm correct, the proposal that we accepted included significant amount of work by the tenant in lieu of rent. So in a sense, we gave up available rent at the get-go to have him do work on this property.
There was prior CPC funding for exterior preservation where the tenant did provide substantial resources to that preservation.
And I think it's important to note that the building is under lease, and the lease expires, I believe, is 2 one-year options that expire next year?
Next year.
Correct, and then it'll have to, if the town decides to release it, it'll have to go out to public bid.
And the tenant has indicated that even if he is not the fortunate one to have this lease renewed, that he has committed to do this work irregardless. It's a very generous offer on his part.
And he is very talented. Thank you.
Sure is.
Okay. Next.
Next one. The next one is the Liberty Plains Cemetery, Phase 3. This is an old friend of the CPC. There have been 2 previous grants. Walking through the Liberty Plains Cemetery is like a walk through Hingham's history. Most of the famous names associated with the early history of the town find their eternal rest in the Liberty Plains Cemetery. The project essentially involves conservation of veterans' graves and families of veterans' graves from the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and the Civil War. We've inspected the restoration. It is being done in a superb way. I'd actually encourage anybody that wants to visit the cemetery to do so. The cemetery is run by a volunteer board. We don't have any town-owned cemeteries in Hingham, and their only source of revenue is essentially the occasional sale of a plot, which would not be sufficient to do this important restoration.
And I agree with Bob. job. I would certainly encourage people to walk through there. The gravestones and the monuments that have been restored are phenomenal, and they're absolutely gorgeous. We saw them when they were black and covered, and you wouldn't think they could be restored, and now the alabaster is white, and you can read the names, and it's a wonderful project. Gentlemen? Mary?
Bob, will there be additional phases? You said this is phase 3.
I think this is the last phase that we've been made aware of. There's nothing presently on the horizon. I wouldn't rule it out, however.
Sure. Any questions from the advisory committee? Thank you.
The next one is another town-owned building, which is described on this slide about the Bear Cove Fire Museum roof. We included in the bottom left picture an aerial view of the Hingham Ammunition Depot area from the early 1940s. At that period in time, there were roughly 100 buildings that were associated with the ammunition depot and the shipyard. And there are only 4 left. This year, the Historical Commission voted to put all 4 of those buildings onto the historic inventory. They are located in a fairly contiguous area. One of the buildings is the building that the Bear Cove Fire Museum is presently in. The Bear Cove Fire Museum is essentially using Building 52, which is the subject of this proposal, as a place which stores a significant number of historic pieces of fire apparatus of the town of Hingham, dating back many years. Some of them are in excellent condition, others are in the process of renovation. Building 52 is sort of diagonally across the roadway from the Bear Cove Fire Museum and might eventually become an annex or something of that nature with respect to the Fire Museum. It is what I referred to a moment ago as one of the town's capital challenged buildings. The roof is leaking presently, and to preserve the structure and the roof, that's why we recommended $72,500. This building goes back in time to the First World War, and it has played a significant role in the military activities associated with the town of Hingham over the course of at least 2 major wars.
Gentlemen?
Only that I see the mission of the Bear Cove Fire Museum as a very positive one and support whatever they're trying to do to extend that. I know they have extra equipment and they need that space. So.
Nothing? Mary?
Have we funded the Bear Cove Fire Museum in the past with CPC funds?
We did a roof replacement on the Bear Cove Fire Museum itself,
Yes.
I think 3 years ago,
Okay.
something like that, a little longer than that. But it looks great, it's doing the job, and the Fire Museum looks great.
Thank you. Any other questions from the advisory committee? Thank you.
The next recommendation relates to handicapped access for the Hingham Congregational Church. This, of course, is one of the iconic buildings of the town of Hingham. The CPA permits the expenditure of CPA funds for handicapped access for historically important buildings. This is on the historic inventory. As we have in the past, we have looked for a substantial contribution from a proponent. The request of $20,000 is approximately 25% of the total cost of the project. A conceptual sketch of the handicapped access in the front of the church is set forth at the bottom right, and I think the church has done a good job with their fundraising and with their design. The anticipation is that the ramp will actually probably be screened by some of the existing shrubbery that will be relocated once the ramp is constructed.
Gentlemen?
I think it's a beautiful church, and I think that will be a nice addition to it.
I think I was actually watching it on TV when this came up, and the question was contribution, and they were enthusiastic about their fundraising, and obviously it's worthwhile.
They've been very aggressive about fundraising and coming to us for only really minimal amounts of money. So,
And it's a great design that's really going to be superb. It'll last at least 100 years. They won't be coming back to us on this design.
Mary?
Questions from the advisory committee?
Who's the architect?
Roger Hoyt.
Hoyt.
I think we're good to move on. Thank you.
Great. The Hingham Historical Archives is again an old friend to the CPC and the Selectmen and the AdCom. Basically, Hingham has one of the most incredible collections of historical documents in the Commonwealth. A few years back, the task force was put together to go forward with a means to archive, determine exactly what it was we have, and make them accessible. The town archivist has done a wonderful job in doing that and is working her way through the town hall as we speak, I think, with respect to these important historical documents. I think it is anticipated that this is the final phase of this project, and there's probably some further work to be done at the Historical Society.
Excellent. Paul and Paul?
Just a general question, is this going to become available online at some point in the future, or?
I think it's going to be electronically available eventually, and it already has been organized in a way that people are able to find things that they were never able to find before. So, for example, the Historical Commission was looking into research about the Arms House, and documents that I think had previously couldn't be located have now been made available for those who are doing the research.
Mary? Just a question. As this work completes, I would imagine that there are going to be some costs associated with maintaining these records, and I'm just wondering where the funding for any sort of ongoing cost would come from.
I think that is being taken care of at the library.
For now, but I think we're going to see a much bigger proposal.
And I know...
So this will be there will be a proposal subsequent to this for the housing of those documents?
I think that is probably something that is still on the drawing board. I know that there are historic document repository issues at the Heritage Museum, and Hingham does have a wealth of resources that need to be appropriately stored and protected. So
I'm just wondering if, on an ongoing basis, some of these costs might then be part of our operating budget. And if so, it would just be important to understand that.
okay.
They're working through that to try and understand what the ongoing costs are, because that was a discussion.
I know the archiving process is involving preservation techniques so that the documents aren't going to deteriorate. But to say anything more than that is probably beyond my pay grade.
Well, I think we'll be seeing some of this coming into the operating budget, or at least a proposal, which would make sense.
I think it would, to the extent possible, it would just be helpful to understand, even if it's a range, what that might be. I would expect that would be a question that might come up. Are there any questions from the advisory committee? Okay, thank you.
The historic gazebo, this is a part of the original Melville Gardens that was actually saved from destruction by the Historical Commission. The proposal is to relocate this gazebo onto Ragged Island. There's actually a sketch of Ragged Island that shows a gazebo that looks remarkably like the one in issue at the top right-hand corner of the sketch. One of the important parts of this project is that the National Park Service and the Harbor Alliance are basically matching the funds for this. And the National Park Service appeared before the CPC, and they are quite interested in forging, I shouldn't say better alliances, I think, with the town of Hingham in terms of the use of the harbor islands, some of which are Hingham's. And so there will be landscaping and access to this gazebo, and I think it's a start towards a good partnership and a good use of this remnant of a once very important historic feature of the town of Hingham.
And it was most impressive to have the head of the island, Childs, and I can't remember his last name, but he came and spoke to the CPC and was very passionate about this, and I think kind of swung a bunch of votes. Mr. Healy.
Is this an existing gazebo that's going to be moved from point A to someplace out on the...
It's in pieces at this point. It needs to be put back together again. It had been moved from Melville Gardens to someone's backyard, essentially.
How big is it?
And then it is
6 feet across, 8 feet across?
It's relatively small.
Yeah.
It's not an enormous gazebo.
Is it being cited here for the purposes of a landmark of some sort, or just, I mean, how did it end up out here?
Ragged Island, I believe, was associated with Melville Gardens historically. Melville Gardens, I think, was principally located on Crow Point. Mm-hmm. We looked at various places at the Historical Commission to cite this. Wanted a piece of public property, wanted a place where it would be visible, and ultimately settled upon this, and we're pleased to have the assistance of the Park Service and the Harbor Island Alliance.
And it's going to be rebuilt to what it originally looked like? Is that the idea?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Paul? Mary?
Questions from advisory? Tom?
Tom Piles from Advisory Committee. Simple question that follows up on the other questions. I assume, so it won't deteriorate in the future, there will be some cost in maintaining this. How does that fit into our budget?
Not at all.
I don't know that that's been addressed at this point by the CPC. We're interested in preserving it. Don't want to see it lost. I think where it is on an island that hopefully the National Park Service is a potential source for ongoing maintenance. But I think that's an issue that needs to be addressed.
One of our concerns was who's going to take care of it along the way, and the National Park Service stepped up to that, because I could see Randy Sylvester rowing out there. Not sure he can see himself, but the National Park Service said that they would, as part of their summer programs, police it. But I think it's a longer-term discussion.
Okay. Next one is the Lincoln School Apartments elevator. This is a project that probably has the most direct impact on a group of citizens of Hingham that has a pressing need at this time, namely for a functional elevator at a senior housing facility. This project could not be funded under the community housing section of the CPA because it was not acquired with CPA funds, and consequently the law doesn't permit funding under community housing. We did determine, however, that the Lincoln School is on the historic inventory. It is a historic asset of the town. The total cost of this project is actually about 5 times the recommended amount. And what we needed to do on the CPA is we needed to prorate the part of the building that was historic, that was going to be served by the elevator, versus the new wing on the left side of the building as you face it from the street, that is also going to be serviced. And it's roughly 43% of the construction costs that this $58,695 represents. There are very substantial costs associated with relocation of the residents while the construction goes on. But the CPA saw this as providing ADA access to a historic asset, to serving our senior citizens. In some ways, it's almost a community housing project, although it's not funded under that rubric.
I'll start with this, Paul.
Sure. I just want to thank you and the committee for coming up with creative way to help, especially some of the elderly in town, but also preserving and upgrading the historic asset. It makes me feel good when I know that the people with the need that they have being at the meetings, that you guys stepped up on this, at least in terms of your proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul?
I'd echo Mr. Gannon's sentiments as well.
Thank you.
I'm going to say a little more, because it is really Bob Curley that found ways that we could maximize the amount of money that we could give Lincoln School Apartments. We all very much wanted to take care of the whole amount, but because of the CPC rules, that really isn't possible. But through Bob's good work, and he spent a great deal of hours on this, we're able to recommend the $58,000, which doesn't seem like a lot, but believe me, Paul Gannon and I have been involved in these projects. It's a lot. We'll take anything. But $58,000 is going to go a long way. So you do deserve some kudos here.
Any questions from advisory? Jim?
Jim Sharkansky, Advisory Committee, 32 Hancock Road. Question or maybe a comment. When the development of the Lincoln School Apartments came about, my understanding from reading and what transpired was that this would be self-sufficient building development. At one point, the town would not have to invest money, and I believe at some point there was supposed to be a reserve built up for such repairs, any kind of repairs of this nature. So my question, I guess, is where are the reserves to help do this type of work? And I want to help the elderly. I'm not against this. I'm for this. But my question is, the understanding by the town when this whole genesis started was that the town would not have to be involved with this development, and there would be money available. So I'm just curious what has happened.
And I guess I'll ask Ted for a little help on. There was a plan with a 30-year financing that would allow a certain level of reserves. And the financing was shortened, so the reserves did not build up as quickly. And unfortunately, the building mechanical systems are not cooperating, that they're failing at a rate that was not planned for. So that's the short answer. Is that okay?
I haven't been working very much on the Lincoln School Apartments in the last few months, so I couldn't really give you a comment. But we did do a 20-year borrowing as opposed to a 30-year borrowing, which I know that when we first took it out, I can remember back 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6, the Lincoln School Board wasn't too pleased about that originally. I think that was in 2000 and I want to say 5 or 6. But again, my memory might be serving me poorly. The positive side of it is they're halfway through their mortgage, and that's what they really need to do is clear that debt off so that they can, get to some of their capital issues.
Thank you.
Bob, I would imagine that question, I think I've heard that question a few times as well. So with respect to writing a comment, and I know a lot of times you do a really nice job putting information in the Hingham Journal, I think we have an opportunity to sort of provide a little bit of detail and context so that by the time we arrive at town meeting, a lot of those questions have been answered on this one.
I know those are questions we addressed at our committee hearings, and it is related, I think, to the debt burden that the Lincoln School has, that once that goes away, they're going to be in excellent shape. But right now, they need a little extra help with an elevator that was already troubled at the time the town acquired the building.
It's also likely that we'll refund this debt, which I believe is north of 4% when we reissue new debt within the next year.
Any other questions from advisory? Thank you.
The Conservation Fund is more or less an annual request by the CPC. The Conservation Fund, in terms of the CPC, provides money for the Conservation Commission to do open space appraisals, to do environmental impact studies, to evaluate costs that would be associated with open space purchases, and it's a necessary fund for the Concom to be involved in the whole open space process that the town has from beginning to end, including some of the legal costs that that are involved in open space. So,
I just had a quick question. So is this is something we've done annually in approximately the same amount?
yes.
Good.
It's the amount varies a little bit, but it's been in that general ballpark.
Abby does come in and give the CPC a very detailed accounting of where the money has been spent over the previous year. Mary?
Advisory questions? Thank you, Bob.
The Social Country Club tennis court renovation. Again, these are town-owned tennis courts. Photograph showing the cracks in the surface now, which renders them basically not playable. So this is a resurfacing project similar to the resurfacing that was done on the inline skating rink and the basketball courts behind Town Hall. And we've looked at it from a number of different perspectives. Roger Fernandez has looked at it. This appears to be the most cost-efficient way of making these courts playable and usable. These courts, and we got a lot of public comment on this, are an integral part of the SNAP program, which services special needs children in a very special way at the country club. They typically spend an hour or so playing tennis, an hour bowling, and an hour on the golf simulators. It's been a well-received program that will probably be expanded, and the costs have actually come down a little bit from what were initially proposed, but it's strongly supported by the Country Club Management Committee and by Recreation.
And by the SNAP group.
And by the SNAP
Yep.
group.
Mr. Healy?
Nothing.
Mr. Gannon?
Just briefly, it's obvious it gets a lot of use in the town. The asset is used, and I'm really happy with regarding SNAP that they've been able to take advantage of the asset, and obviously not just for that reason, but because of all the folks that use it, it was money well spent.
One thing we should point out here, this is a great opportunity and also a great example of two organizations working together, where the Country Club Management Committee and our Recreation Department and Recreation Commission, where they've gotten together and made a much bigger project and a much more successful project with working together. Mary?
Is this a similar technology to what we did at the high school when the tennis courts were rehabilitated?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from advisory?
I see Vicki Donald nodding her head, so I've got,
Thank you, Vicki.
I've got confirmation
Thank you.
from the ultimate authority.
And I think that experience and the results that were expected have occurred, so it's good to hear. Thank you.
The barn, Phase 4. This is a recreation project, and this is the final phase of the barn. I knew someone would be smiling about that. And we've listed the roughly $525,000 of prior CPA expenditures on the barn. And I will say right off the bat that the Recreation Commission has committed to spend up to $100,000 of its funds to basically guarantee that this project will be finished this year. It's the work that's been done structurally is very impressive. It's going to add parking. It's going to add multi-use recreational space. I know the numbers may appear to some to be high, but Roger Fernandez has assured us that this really is a very reasonable cost for a recreational facility of this nature.
And just the historic preservation of the last piece of the cordage factory. The inside, once this is open, I hope everybody will take advantage of going and seeing the inside. It's structurally elegant. It's a beautiful building inside. So we're looking forward to it opening. I'll open it. Paul?
Is there a breakdown as to how much of this work is site work, or how much of the cost is site work as opposed to continued work on the structure?
There's a complete line item detail of exactly what's going into this. I know at the last minute this year we were advised that there was a need for a fire suppression system that boosted the cost somewhat. I don't remember specifically the line item for the site work, but I know that site work and parking is to be included.
I actually sent it to you because it is down to the fixtures on the wall.
Yeah, it's a very detailed
Yes.
construction
Yep.
proposal.
I'll send it to you. Was that Mary?
I would just point out that the ongoing costs for maintaining and operating this facility will be borne through the Recreation Commission through user funds it generates. So the cost to operate and open this, the town has the advantage of getting the benefit of the space and the services, but it is not a burden on the taxpayers.
It was eye-opening to me this year, the amount of revenue that the Recreation Commission has actually been able to generate from so many of the wonderful programs that they sponsor.
As a town, we bear responsibility for the Recreation Commission, the director's salary, but again, I think it's important to know that the ongoing costs for this one have already been accounted for through the generosity of the Recreation Commission and through user fees.
Well, Mark Thorell, who's here tonight, does a fantastic job. He's always had every answer for us at our committee meetings, and I feel the Recreation Commission, between the committee and Mark, is in great hands.
I think they put together a really good business plan on this too that was very detailed. So,
Are there any other questions from advisory? Okay. Thank you, Bob.
one last thing on the barn. One of the big pluses is going to be it will offload some of the parking issues at Town Hall because there will be more than enough parking over by the fire station and by this building. So that's a real plus.
The Hingham Affordable Housing Trust Opportunity Fund. Last year, the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust came to us and requested $175,000 for what they termed an opportunity fund. That fund was actually used to purchase a condominium on Beale Street, and the Affordable Housing Trust has been going through a detailed learning process of just how to convert that condominium into a unit that will be made affordable in perpetuity, at which point it will then be sold and the money will come back to the Affordable Housing Trust to be reused with respect to hopefully similar activities throughout the town. They asked us for another $175,000 this year. We decided to recommend 100 because we expected that probably at least 150,000 or so was going to be coming back to them with respect to the ultimate sale of the condominium. And they also were looking for some funds for the selectmen's parcel that I'll be talking about in a moment. So we thought that $100,000 was an appropriate amount to recommend this year for this type of opportunity funding to promote community housing. All of this money is coming out of the Community Housing Reserve, so it is money that has to be dedicated to community housing, and this is a very creative and productive way to do it.
Start with you, Mr. G. No? Paul?
I like creative ways to find more housing.
Well, and hopefully this is going to encourage the Housing Trust to begin looking throughout the town to place affordable units. Mary?
Any questions from advisory? Jim?
Jim Sharkansky, Advisory Committee, 32 Hancock Road. So, two-part question, really. One, I'm just curious if, I think it's this year, the Housing Trust will then put a statement at the town meeting presented and how their funds are being spent and what they're earning, if I remember correctly.
Are you referring to the allocation?
I think there was we wanted the Housing Trust to publicize how they're deriving their monies and how they're using them, specifically for projects, properties.
Well, that might be under their annual report, but I know that we had discussions the last several years about making sure that they have an allocation plan.
Okay. The reason I ask is I'm just wondering where the funds come from, or where they are from their other projects, such as the Beale Street properties that they have sold. Is there money that profits from those properties? Are they being used as the seed money, or are they solely looking to the town for additional seed money?
And I refer to Tim White, and who's the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. They review their financials every month at their meeting. So I think maybe a call to him and then either attend one of the meetings or just ask for a sit-down to go over their finances.
Sure. Thank you.
I actually believe they are required to come to the advisory committee once a year, and we typically see them in the February-March timeframe, so thank you for remembering to invite them.
And they come before us once a year also. So.
We did look at their financials in conjunction with this project. They don't have any proceeds coming in from the sale of Beale Street, but that's anticipated that that's going to happen hopefully within the next 6 months. And we also looked at their finances for the Selectmen's parcel, which is the next one. The Selectmen's parcel is a large body of land that was acquired at the request of the Selectmen. It's down between the back of the DPW building and Beale Street. It's a very sizable piece of wooded land. The Affordable Housing Trust has contracted with someone to come up with a complete site development plan, and that process is underway. By memory, I think they're looking at developing somewhere between 24 and 30 affordable units in that area, and they're confident that they've got a good development designer, and ultimately that design will go to a bidder, a private bidder, for the actual construction. And they felt they needed another $25,000 to be able to move forward with the cost of doing the planning in the next funding cycle.
Gentlemen?
Just a clarification, they're talking about putting 30 affordable units, give or take, in that area?
20 to 40.
I think the number is yet to be determined.
Yes.
That's one of the things that this planner is being involved with.
Thank you, Bob.
Is the no vote
Oh, sorry.
that we keep seeing here is the minority?
Jim?
Oh, Jim wants it?
Yes.
Jim, if you have a question, come on up.
Hi, Jim.
So just a quick,
Identify yourself. We all know who you are.
Jim Watson, 291 Rockland Street, Housing Authority, member of the CPC. Now, one variation is that the trust, last time I talked to Tim, is planning a graduated cost level, units affordable to people making 30, 40, 50, 60, up to 120% of the median, so that it isn't a one strata very low income project. It's a mixed income project. And in Hingham terms, even for people making 120% of the median, which is like $120,000 a year, there isn't a lot on the market. So it's affordable, but in a much more diverse sense than some people thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on the Selectmen's parcel? Okay.
132 Scotland Street is an affordable residential property that is owned by the town. It's administered through the Hingham Housing Authority, and it abuts the Scotland Street conservation area, and it was acquired with the CPA funds, and consequently we are able to fund certain aspects of its rehabilitation and restoration. And that's what this involves in terms of the restoration of the building envelope, shingles, house wrap, window trim, and the Housing Authority is committed to using this property for private residential affordable housing. It needs this funding. The Housing Authority has very limited sources of funds on its own, and the CPC feels that this is part of what the Community Housing Reserve is all about.
Mr. G. Nope. Paul? No. Mary?
Advisory members? Thank you, Bob.
Okay. And the last one is another old friend, the CPC Administration Fund. We are recommending $37.5. This fund goes to paying part of Carol Costello's salary, part of Roger Fernandez's salary, legal costs for some of our CPC projects, anything that is associated with the CPC administration. We're allowed to recommend up to 5% of CPC revenues. We have been very conservative in the past. The administrative appropriations have averaged 2.2% of annual CPA revenues. This year, because we kind of pared things to the bone in prior years, we wanted to make sure that we had sufficient funds, that we weren't going to run out of payroll. And so that's where we came up with the $37.5.
Paul? Mary?
Jim? Got to go up to the mic. Sorry.
Jim Sharkey, Advisory Committee. Just curious, Bob, maybe I missed it in your presentation. The state government matches it in some percentage of our CPC funds, and if so, can you tell us how much this year we would anticipate in receiving?
It was over 260, something like. It's
It would represent about 24%.
24%. All right. And just another question. Just, do you ever see in the future sometime where the CPC just doesn't spend all the money they have available, that at some point they just say, we'll set aside this money, don't see a project that is in need of this at this time, and just set it aside in a reserve?
Well, we've actually set aside the $38,000 in the Community Housing Reserve this year. We set aside $84,000 in the Open Space Reserve, which is basically what Open Space asked us to do, because the open space parcels we were potentially interested in acquiring this year were not workable. So that next year, for example, we'll probably have, with next year's reserves, we'll have over $200,000 in the open space reserve. We've also started the rainy day fund, where we decided not to spend that money, and we will continue to do that in the future, and we've been careful to budget for the Heritage Museum.
Okay, thank you.
May I just ask you a follow-up question on the Heritage Museum, if you could just refresh my memory? The total CPC dollars that were committed, it was over $1 million?
It was a $1.1 million bonding recommendation and approval by town meeting.
And did, again, I apologize for asking, the repayment, the number of years that was going to be repaid over, was that defined when town meeting approved this a few years ago?
It was not defined.
Okay. I guess what I'm wondering is, has the committee thought about, I noticed that last year you set aside $146,000. This year you're setting aside $30,000. You're ahead of the game, given where the bond issuance is. But, as you look out, are you thinking we're going to repay this over 10 years? We're going to repay it over 20 years?
Our original thinking was 10 years.
Okay.
But I think, I myself have thought about possibly even shorter than that, rather than longer. The 10 years gives us roughly an annual expenditure that is close to the historic preservation reserve.
Yes.
That would need to be spent for historic preservation in any event. I think the CPC and the Historical Commission remains of the view that this is probably the #1 important project in terms of the use of CPC funds. But I think from the point of view of the CPC, it's not going to break the bank if we spent $200,000 a year in repayment, or even $250,000 a year in repayment. It detracts from our ability to do other things.
Sure.
But we're not looking at anything longer than 10 years.
You folks do such a good job, and you're in the situation where you get more requests than available funds. A suggestion I might offer is, after town meeting, when you're still meeting, to perhaps think about what the funding schedule might be in the absence of any projects that are on the horizon, so that you could almost, as you enter into next year, say, our funding schedule says we're going to take, these are our available funds, we're going to take this much right off the top to put towards the Heritage Museum, and then evaluate the balance of our projects against what's remaining. It just might be a helpful thing to do in the absence of projects, because I think you typically have a year when you have lots of wonderful requests and just not enough funds to go around.
Which was this year as well. There were a number of excellent proposals that we just couldn't get to, that we will welcome seeing next year. But the process you described is essentially what we do. We start with taking out the money to pay with what we have to pay for the Heritage Museum, but we also ask for 5-year plans from open space, from historical, from recreation, which has been great at 5-year planning, and from housing. To the extent that we can determine what's on the horizon early, we like to do that.
Thank you very much.
Bob, I want to thank you and the committee, and for me, the privilege of being with the committee for 2 years. The thought process that goes into the projects and the process to get to the point where we are tonight is truly amazing. And I think one of the significant items that has come about between last year and this year, and it may seem small, but it isn't, this is a huge jump, is the rainy day fund. That the recognition that we don't have to spend every dime, that there is a lot of pre-screening up front, which helps not only the committee, but it also helps the proponents coming in, that they actually don't get their hopes up. that they understand the process, they understand that their project is certainly not ready for prime time, that I think the process that you have in place now is really amazing, but it's also very efficient, and can only get better. And Carol, you're amazing. She keeps all of us in these books we get, and the amount of paper and the amount of information we have to consume. Without Carol, I honestly can't imagine how we would do this, because it is, every year we end up with a book like this. And it's always well organized, the projects. We understand the project from beginning to end because we've got all the information in one place. But I thank Bob and the committee. It's been quite a ride, and it's a good ride.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Thank the committee members. And a special shout out to Matt Syper, who is going to share, our vice chair, who is going to share presentation duties tonight, but he's home with a recuperating daughter. So, Matt, hope all is well. Hope you're out there watching.
Thank you, Bob, very much.
Thank you.
Any last questions before we let him go? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Bob. Mary, we have a couple wrap-up things I think we might, and then we'll go into the executive session if that's... Mr. Healy, do you have any selectmen reports?
Before the storm, I sent a message out to Chief Moreno, reminding him that he started his career working a blizzard and he's ending it working a blizzard. So I was happy to see that everything went well. I echo your comments about the fine job that our police, fire, highway, and light did, making it an unpleasant experience, but one that we're putting behind us in anticipation of the next one. So thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen, for all that hard work.
Paul?
I mean, I'll just echo that. You folks have talked about it already, but I was very impressed. This was not your typical storm. This is not your typical 2 or 3 day event. And as I don't know if somebody said earlier, the plows and the first responders, they were everywhere. I mean, I'll tell you that, I never seen anybody do such a good job. And when I had to drive into other parts of Eastern Mass, shall we say, I don't want to identify any particular spots, boy, was it rough going, and it's just nice to be able to get around. A couple other quick things. February 4th, one of our partners in our substance abuse coalition, Safe Harbor Cohasset Coalition, is having a forum from 7 to 9 at the Cohasset High School, and I just recommend anybody that can get down there to go, because it really is important. You just don't have to just read the papers every day and realize what we're up against in it, and best way to fight it is as a community and as a coalition. So I'll be there. I hope anybody that can make it. We have our next meeting on February 11th. It's a Wednesday at 5 o'clock, right on third floor, and the town Hingham, and we have guest speakers, and we're working very hard. So we're working with our other members of the coalition. Hull has joined us in other parts of South Shore. So we're really working hard at this, and it's important. So a couple of quick things. I've been trying to, for those of you that don't know me very well, I happen to be of Irish descent, and so I take great pride in that, as many people do in their ethnic background. And coming from an area originally where we celebrated St. Patrick's Day for several weeks and maybe over a month, with many events, I always hoped that we could do something like that down in Hingham. And my hope is, and I'm working with Hingham SNAP, Special Needs Athletic Program, is to be able to do two things: to have an event in Hingham in March to celebrate the holiday with gathering of everybody, and at the same time raising some money for a worthy cause such as SNAP. So I'll give you more information. We have some entertainment, some Irish step, and maybe we have folks that can hold the tune and they can get up there and sing for us. But we're looking forward to it, and it's only in the early stages, but we're really looking forward to it. And that's about it.
That should be fun.
That should be fun.
Ted, do you have anything more?
No, I think I covered everything.
Okay. I'll send us into executive session. Mary, do you have to do the same thing with advisory?
And Tom will make a motion.
Okay,
Do a roll call.
then I recommend the board enter executive session with the advisory committee and Water Acquisition Study Committee to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, because discussion in open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the town. The board will not resume open session this evening, and we'll do our roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye. Mary?
Tom Pyle from the advisory committee. I'd like to move that the advisory committee go into executive session with the Board of Selectmen and the Water Acquisition Study Committee to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, because discussions in open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the town, and we will not come back to.
Take a roll call vote. Tom?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Craig?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Victor? Lucy?
Aye.
Eric? Dan? Linda? Okay.
And, Tom,
And Donna?
And Eric?
Got Eric.
Oh, you
Thank
got Eric, okay. Okay, thank you all. We'll see you next week.